All right, people. Welcome to this episode of the Visionary Experience. Today, you got the four horsemen. That's right. You see all four of us. I got my man, Andre Gould, president, CEO, head honcho of New Legacy Consulting. I got my man, Chris Brouard here, who's the head processor here at Visionary Lending, as well as the CEO and visionary of Infinite Legacies up in Baltimore, Maryland. And we got our main man, Anton Keith, the podcast engineer, the man behind the stage, the puppet master himself. So, all right. Welcome, fellas. How are you doing today?
Doing well, doing well.
What's going on? What's going on? Let's
All
make it
right, all
happen.
right. All right. So today, part of the theme of what we're going to discuss is about legacy. Okay? It's about legacy, not only for ourselves as individuals, but for our families. Okay? And that's extremely important, especially coming into this year. As we all know, over the past couple of years, it's been unique. Um, I know me personally, uh, I'm definitely punch drunk when it comes to hearing about COVID-19 and the pandemic, but it seems like it's omnipresent, right? We went through 2020. It was a definitely an outlier to say the least. Last year, it seemed to be a lot of progress made with the different vaccines that came and gave a lot of uh, confidence to people, but at the same time, it became very polarizing, right? Interest rates remained low, consumer confidence was high. Um, People were resigning from their jobs at record rates for various reasons, which we can also talk about. And amazing and funny as it is, coming into this year, we got a hint that because of inflation, the Federal Reserve plans on, well, has been, increasing interest rates, which we can talk about a little bit. So now that's more of the flavor of the month, talking about inflation. So there's a lot of different things going on. We're really just here at the very beginning of 2022, but there's so much that we can do. There's so much in store, and I look forward to having a great conversation. Definitely with you guys. So let's just kind of go ahead and get this party started. So one of the things that we had discussed months and months ago with Andre was the importance of planning, financial planning for young adults, and young and middle-aged families. And I think that question is extremely relevant, today with everything that's going on. So Andre, we're going to go ahead and start off with you, so looking at what we've experienced, okay, in totality over the past couple of years here in this country, now coming into 2022 with the current economic environment. Why is it so important now more than ever that families and young adults, young professionals need to engage in financial planning?
Yeah, I think it's everything. Like it's absolutely everything when you think about, as you said, the last 2 years and the climate that we've been living in. A solid plan of action in place would have allowed a lot of people to do this thing a lot more smoothly. And unfortunately, you know, if you didn't have a plan in place, you might have felt the ramifications of that. Um, Even when you talk about the mass exodus from the workforce,
Right.
um, if people had a plan in place, if people had the reserves necessary for them to do so seamlessly, then it wouldn't have been such a shock to society as a whole. It wouldn't have been shocks to families, institutions. I think about a lot of the nonprofit services that were hit up during uh, the last 2 years. And so planning is really everything. We talk about generational wealth, and that's
I
but we
think you
talk
froze.
about
There we go.
building generational wealth. And what does that mean? What does that look like
Right.
without a plan?
Absolutely. And so how would you define generational wealth? Oh, I think we lost him.
Yeah, I'll bring it
Yes.
back. Let's keep
Okay.
going.
No problem. So yeah, we had that question for Andre. So let me go ahead and flip that question over to Chris. Chris, how
Okay.
would you define generational wealth?
Well, generational wealth, I think, in its simplest form, is the assets that you pass on to your next generation, your children, your grandchildren, great grandchildren. The challenge is that most families are passing on debt and
Right.
not assets, which obviously is counterproductive.
No, absolutely. And so, yeah, Andre, Chris was just sharing about what his definition of generational wealth is. So, can you reiterate what your definition of generational wealth is?
I think that if you ask people, different people are going to give you different answers.
Okay.
I think that from my standpoint, when I think about generational wealth, is both monetary but also wisdom,
Yes.
along with assets as well.
Absolutely.
And so when I think about generational wealth, of course, my kids' are going to have a different life than I did, even a different starting point. My kids are going to have a different starting point than I did. And of course, therefore, their kids are going to have a different starting point. Now, that is supposed to be the case in theory, but statistics are showing a little bit of a different thing. And so I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole, but statistics are showing a little bit of a different thing.
No, absolutely. And Anton, if you could allow me to share my screen, because we're going to talk about this a little bit. All right. You see my screen? So this comes from the Federal Reserve. Okay. So I did some research. So anything that we're showing on here, I highly recommend that you do your own research. Okay. This is not something that I'm saying is definitive. But again, this is from the Federal Reserve .gov website. So let me just scroll down a little bit here. Okay. Now, this talks about the expected inheritances and other family support, right? So if we look at this screen right here, can you guys see that? Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
I found this to be amazing. So basically what this is, we're only going to look at a couple of the lines here, but it has here, it says white families are substantially, and this is from a 2019 survey. Okay, 2019 survey. So it's not that long ago. And it says white families are substantially more likely to receive inheritances, gifts, and other family support than Black and Hispanic families. So let me stop right there. This podcast is not about, white people being bad or this or that. This is about disparity, and let's understand why there's a disparity, right? And I think that's extremely important to understand. And so if you look here at this very first line, it says here, received an inheritance from a parent. Now, we don't necessarily know what that exact amount was, but this is from a survey, right? So looking at that, 29.9% received some type of inheritance of whites. 10.1% of Black or African Americans received some type of inheritance. Latinos or Hispanics, 7.2%. Other is actually considered like East Asian, Indian, and such, right? And that's 17.8%, right? So now if you scroll down, if you look here, expect an inheritance, right? And you look at these numbers here, 17.1% of whites expect to get something. 6% of Black or African Americans expect to get some type of an inheritance. Hispanics, 4.2%. And again, Asian, East Asian, Indian, et cetera, Middle Eastern expect 14.7%. What really got me was this line right here. There, who could expect to get at least $3,000 from family or friends? And we kind of deal with this a lot in housing, because if someone is looking, if they're looking to get qualified to purchase a home, but income wise they don't quite qualify, we often mention to people, hey, you can get what's called a non-occupant cosigner, someone who can have a certain amount of income to be able to help you. Or if their assets are a bit low, they can get a gift from a qualified family member, right, to help them. So, and most times people aren't able to, unfortunately. There are the times when people are. But if you look here, who can get $3,000 from family or a parent, right? 71.9% of whites can get three G's, right? 40.9% of blacks can probably expect that. 57.8% of Hispanics can expect that, and 63.4% of other can expect that. And it's just $3,000. And when I look at this, it really speaks to what you had mentioned, Andre, that we're not saving properly. We're not putting money in reserves aside properly. There aren't liquid funds available for some reason. And we'll talk about that. Which of these statistics here really stand out to you guys the most? What does it really say to you? And I'll let anybody go with regards to looking at these items.
I am surprised that percentage or that amount of people feel like they could get $3,000 from their family.
Okay.
I would have thought that it would have been a much lower percentage based on the amount of people in America who have $1,000 in their savings account.
Got it.
And so I'm surprised.
No, absolutely.
Well, that's actually the first of Dave Ramsey's baby steps, right? That first $1,000, because so many people can't even get that. But what I find interesting here is the difference between the actual receipt of inheritance and the expected inheritance. And if you look on the second line where it says the median inheritance was $88,000, and the expected inheritance was 195 in the white column. There's quite a discrepancy there. But the actual inheritance among the whites and the blacks are almost equal in 2019. Though the percent of people that received was much less, the dollar amount is equal.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And really, an inheritance, of course, this is in thousands. The inheritance can be life insurance, right? The inheritance can be money that's in some type of a liquid account, or that inheritance might be, maybe it's the net equity on some type of property, or something like that. So, this just to let you know, this information comes from, again, a 2019 survey of consumer finance. Okay. And it's entitled Disparities in Wealth by Race and Ethnicity, in a 2019 survey of consumer finances. And so, again, you can definitely research that. But yeah, some of these numbers are definitely, surprising. And, to me, when I look at this, again, I think people have to have access to education with regards to planning. And Anton, you can go ahead and stop the share screen. Thank you. Access to education, access to certain financial products and such. But I think it's not only just the access and the education. What do you think we need to do today? Okay, whether it's, let's say, Chris, you're working hard to help people to purchase their own home up in Baltimore, right? Or Andre, you're helping people with regards to financial planning. But there's a crucial part that we've got to, we can't omit here, because people can plan and people can prepare, but at the end of the day, they have to execute, right? They actually have to do it. So what would you say that we can do to actually help people to take those steps to move forward, with regards to saving or opening that account, or, taking those steps forward? Hopefully that makes sense.
I think it's a mindset problem. I don't think it's a like Andre and Chris and you, Brandon, that you guys aren't doing your jobs or you're not making yourselves available to people. I don't think it's that. I think that it has to come from we have to shift as minorities. I can only speak from a minority standpoint, but if you look at it, I mean, it was a survey studying disparities, right?
Yes.
If you took like the white families and you saw that like close to 30% of the white families' parents had degrees, and then close to 30% of them expected an inheritance. But if you look at the minorities, the percentage of families who had degrees was 25%, but the expected people who expected a and inheritance was half of that, and it was even
Mhm.
less for the Hispanic family.
Right. And I
So,
have that up on the screen if you wanted to bring that back up if people wanted to see it.
yeah.
But go ahead.
So yeah, so you see that parents of Black and Hispanic families were 25 and 15% respectively, but the ones who actually received something was 10 and 7. So that tells you it's not necessarily like we've gotten to the point in terms of minorities where we understand that in order to advance in this country, you need to be educated, right? So we're starting to understand that, and we're starting to sort of, take advantages of that. But I think the issue is that we're still in a place where we're in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can't plan for tomorrow because we're so worried about today. And until we sort of change that mindset, people won't see the importance of talking to an Andre or a Chris or you.
Right.
And until you change that mindset from that sort of survivalist mentality, you won't see a lot of wealth being passed on.
Right. And one of the interesting differences in the numbers, if you look here where it says Hispanic, right? All right. So it's like, okay, the parents, because so many are immigrants, right, from various countries, and so there may not be, the prevalence of having a college degree, right? 15.2%. However, look at the difference here, right? It's a sizable difference, right? In terms of their being able to get $3,000. And from my experience and from the people that I've talked to, a lot of, especially Latino immigrants, traditionally just haven't trusted banks. So they keep a lot of cash on hand, or it's been passed down from generation to generation, family members to save money, right? To keep money, liquid. So that's probably, it's a little bit more of a cultural thing. But to me, the problem there is that money is not working for them, right? It's sitting static and it's not gaining interest. And to me, that's the education gap, right? That's the education and the opportunity gap where that money could actually go to work for them. But there's a trust gap as well, right? For sure. It's like, well, how am I going to give you my money? But I don't know if you're going to run off with it and everything.
It's sort of like a cross problem where Hispanic folks don't trust banks, but with Black folks, the banks don't trust Black people. So it's kind of
well, there's an additional layer to that also, right? Because I agree with both you guys are saying. Step one is the education, right? And there's a lot of people out there trying to educate, and there's an acceptance of the need for education, but then there's also a lack of trust between banks and often between people, because the problem that we have, especially in America, is most of the financial advisors don't look like us. So when you have these people trying to convince people that look like us to hand over their money, it usually isn't as effective. So a lot of people don't have that trust to execute. So they can receive the education, but don't have the trust to execute. And then also, there is an uprising of people that do look like us that are giving that education out, like the Earn Your Leisure guys that have like 1 million followers, right? So there are, a lot of efforts being made to change that, but to get the trust to be built, it takes time.
Right.
Do you think that matters?
Yeah, because if you don't execute, you can't change your situation.
No. But you talked about like there's not a lot of people in your guys' field that look like you guys, and I'm asking, does it matter what the people look like as long as they're fit to do the job?
Oh no, absolutely not. Anybody of any race or ethnicity can execute for you, but it doesn't matter what somebody can do for you if you don't believe they can do it for you, because you're not going to do it with them.
Yeah. And I'll add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I will add to that, to the dialogue that Chris and Anton is having, is also too, there is a sense of understanding culturally someone else too. that they might feel comfortable to work with you. I think it's an assumption, an inherent assumption that just because somebody is a financial advisor, they feel comfortable with the advice that one may be giving them. Additionally, I think it's another layer to, and this is an apolitical conversation, but I think that there is another driving factor to this equation too, which is, and it comes back to planning. When we talk about college, and yes, there's, there was, it's a 10% gap, give or take, between white people and Black people that actually go to, that have a college degree, right? But I can guarantee you that the gap is much larger as far as how many of those people actually got their college paid for, meaning had assets set aside specifically for the children or the individuals to actually go to school.
It's a great point.
The large number of people who was entrusted with tens of thousands of dollars at the age of 18. Again, I don't want to get down to a rabbit hole with this, but tens of thousands of dollars at the age of 18 to use to go to school with very little direction. And so there's a issue also with student loans where they're not allowed to accumulate the type of wealth that others may be able to accumulate to then pass along too. So it's a bit of a ripple effect, in my opinion, when we start talking about, college. College is a different experience. I know I have friends that went to college, and their experience is much different than my experience.
We lose them again?
Did I freeze up?
Yeah, but we can hear you. There, you're back.
No, you're back now.
Can you hear us?
Oh, he might go out.
Sorry.
No, that's
I
okay.
can hear you. Sorry, I don't. Yeah.
Don't worry, Anton will mix it over with the commercial.
But in any regards, to my point, I think that everybody's college experience may not be the same, and so and definitely, if you look at the statistics, the way that the college was financed, I would be interested in those statistics as far as how many of those people's college, how many of those folks' college was actually financed as opposed to paid for by proper planning. And so that's why we need to plan as well.
No, I think that's a fantastic point. And I want to dig in a little bit on what the three of you were talking about with regards to with a financial advisor or such, someone that looks like you. I really feel that, you're only going to give your money to someone that you feel has your best interest in mind, right? For sure. But I think it's twofold. Not only do they have your best interest in mind, but they actually know what they're doing, right? And so, I think those two things are extremely important. And those are two things that, in terms of home ownership, that we have been shouting from the rooftops for years, in terms of there is no way that we do business in an exclusionary fashion here, right? At Visionary Lending, we help anybody and everybody, because that's what God calls us to do, and that's what our conviction is, right? And at the same time, we also have to meet people where they're at, because we can't expect them to meet us where we're at. And so if we have to meet them where they're at, if they have someone that looks like them, that speaks the language that they do, right? That they feel that they can connect with. And there's also competency that we have, that we know what we're doing, that we're not just going to lose all their money, right? Because then it makes it even worse, for the next person, coming down. And so, let me ask you this, and this is kind of directed toward Chris, and Andre. When it comes to you dealing with different clients, whether Andre is with you working in financial advising, and Chris, when you are talking to different prospective investors with regards to purchasing, properties, what are you actually doing to gain their trust so that they're ready to kind of go in lockstep and move forward with you?
Let Andre go first.
So I think it depends on the client.
Mhm.
And I think it depends on the client, because I also serve whoever would entrust me in serving them in that way.
Absolutely.
And so I don't just specifically serve minorities. I serve anybody and everybody. With that being said, to your pointed question, I think that I'm trying to remember exactly how you worded the question. Can you repeat it just real
Yeah.
quick?
Well, basically, just like what do you actually do when you're face to face with a client or two? Like, so what are you doing so that they have that trust level in you, so that they're going ahead and they're signing on the dotted line,
Sure.
and they're moving forward with you?
Okay. Yeah, good question. I think that the first thing is I want them to feel very secure that I'm not sitting in this ivory tower type of seat looking down on them in shame. And so I don't want them to feel shame when they come to me looking and seeking for advice for maybe some of the things that they did wrong, some of the things that they did right. So I want them to feel very comfortable with the fact that, look, like, we've all done silly with money. It's not where we start, it's kind of where we're going, what we're looking forward to doing. And so just getting people to understand, like, look, like, we've made some mistakes. We may have made some mistakes. You may have done great. Let's see how we can capitalize on the opportunities before us, and not make people feel bad, but comfortable and confident, both in my abilities, but then also that I'm not looking down on them either. That's what I get the most. People feeling shame and guilt for maybe mistakes that they may have made financially. And I'm not here in a position to judge. I'm here in a position to serve and help.
That's right. Appreciate that. Yeah. What about you, Chris?
That's important, is to not, discourage people by pointing out all the mistakes, but to inspire them, to show them that, regardless of what's happened before, you can and will do better. My area is a little bit different from the financial planning that Andre does. When I'm talking about real estate investments with people, I'm an open book. Everything that I'm legally allowed to share, I share with people. The details of my plan. I have spreadsheets, portfolios, numbers, my connections with the government and other developers, to just try to show that, there's been quite a intense amount of research and footwork that's gone into doing this. And I also don't pressure people. I let people make their own decisions based off of the information I give them. And, I give them all the information that I have available to me. And whether they're ready now or they're ready months later, I've had several people that weren't ready at the time. They call me up a few months later, like, I'm ready now, and they make an investment. I try to meet people where they're at, like you were saying before. And I think that as things progress, and I put everything on my social media, like I said, I'm an open book. You want to see what's going on with me? It's not hard. You just click my profile. As more people see what's going on, I know more people would be on board. So that's why I don't see a need to pressure people.
No, absolutely. And so I've got a couple of other graphs up here, but we're gonna get to them in a minute. So something that bothers me, but I understand it, but it bothers me nonetheless, is the difference between, and I was actually listening to your boy Grant Cardone was talking about this, right? But he's talking the truth though. Speaking the truth, the difference between depreciating assets and appreciating assets, right? And so that's one of the things that I think we really need to be honest and have an open and honest conversation about, right? Within, I think culturally, within the minority community, probably looking back over the past maybe 30, 40 years for various reasons, there's been much more of a focus on depreciating assets. And what do I mean by that? Cars, clothing, certain items of jewelry, kind of the exterior things, versus appreciating assets, real estate, certain financial, assets. So why do you think that people in the minority community have focused more and given more and paid more, right, for depreciating items versus items in the long run that will appreciate and help them out financially? What do you think is the undercurrent that's been going on there, and how do we address that?
But I actually talk about things like that a lot on my Facebook videos that I do, right? So, I mean, we live in a consumer capitalist economy, right, where the media is always telling us to buy this, and everybody wants to keep up with the Joneses, right? And from what I've realized from meeting with people one-on-one is there's a lot of people that feel like things they didn't have growing up, as they get older, they want to try to make up for lost time, and they're buying a lot of things that they wish they had when they were younger. So there's a mixture of all that. There's also like the flex culture that we see where, I want to have the same things that these celebrities have, but I don't have the same money that the celebrities have. So it's like in my video that I did a couple of weeks ago, I was making some comparisons where like, the $10,000 Rolex tells the same time as the $100 G-Shock.
There you go.
And the $500 Yeezys don't protect your feet any better than the $50 Adidas. But still, we're out here, trying to obtain all these things to look like we're these people that we see on TV. But it's killing us and our ability to pass on generational wealth because we've consumed it all in our life.
Right.
No, good points, Chris. I share a lot of the same sentiments, but I'll just sum it up in one word: is dignity. And what I mean by that is, some of us grew up not having much. A lot of us grew up, not having a whole lot, and particularly in the minority communities.
Right.
And so when we get the opportunity, or when we get that first job or that first check or the money that doesn't have us necessarily living paycheck to paycheck, we want to redeem some dignity. We want to redeem some sense of purpose. And a lot of times that comes by the way that we look, meaning the way that we dress, the cars that we drive. And so we're searching for this dignity. And unfortunately, it has us thinking short term and not with the end in mind.
Right.
And so that's what I'll sum it up to is I think it's a dignity thing. And I think that when we talk about generational wealth, the only way that can be assumed, or the only way that we can, unless you have your outliers, right? You have those people who just do great, professionally. You have also those folks who, have fame, are artists in some sense and just has a great talent. You have athletes, of course, but those are a very, very, very small percentage of the population that actually.
We lose him?
Yeah, we lost him. It's okay.
Let me see if he comes back.
Yeah.
No, he was making a good point. I mean, I think that. Right. Hold on, let me see if he comes back. Hold on.
Not a problem.
Yeah, I think that the thing is, generational wealth isn't sexy. You know what I mean? To even talk about, discuss, know, and unfortunately, like that, we like the sexy things. We like to look good to other people. We like to feel good against other people. We like people to talk about us. I think that everybody's like that to a certain degree. He's back.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that everybody's like that to a certain degree. Right. I just think sometimes it's more highlighted when it comes to us as minorities.
No, absolutely. I mean? Yeah.
I just think it's highlighted because I think that like there are poor people everywhere. You know what I mean? I just think that it's kind of highlighted in this country. But I think that it can be changed. You back, Andre?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry.
Okay.
No sweat. I think Andre, you bring up. I think
I
you
don't know
bring
what's
up.
going on.
You bring up a
Mhm.
fantastic point with regards to dignity, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's that. I think that's a critical word. And how have we defined dignity, right, within the minority community? Because, you know, d- the thing is, like, if you kind of look back, like as I harp about so much, with regards to the percentages of home ownership and the barriers to entry for home ownership, African Americans and those of color, in order to have dignity, right, in decades preceding, weren't able to own homes and have the dignity of home ownership. So as a result, they're like, well, let me look nice, right? If I'm renting, let me have the nicest clothes, let me have a nice car, right? Let me have some nice jewelry, right? Let me have some type of a societal status symbol or status, level. And I agree with you 100%. And I think what we need to do now is we need to shift that, right? I think we really need, it's a tectonic shift, so it's slow. But if we can slowly shift that mindset, like, okay, those things are all well and good. But if you're not only thinking for the now, but you're thinking for the future, right? Then we've got to actually have that mindset shift. Because truth be told, like, there's the book, The Millionaire Next Door, right? There's so many people who you wouldn't even know have a certain amount of net wealth, right? Because they're not projecting it on their body, on their person, right? But they have a whole different set of values, when it comes to money. And that's me personally. That's how I personally operate. But I also agree with what your boy Dame Dash says. Look, when you go to an interview, don't dress like you're going to the club. Dress like you own the club. And I was like, yeah, that's true. Like,
Yeah.
but you want to project yourself because you also need to get people's respect, because they are going to judge you based upon your appearance. So we do need to have that, that sense of balance.
I love that book too. That Millionaire Next Door. I
Yes.
actually thinking about the quote, "Big hat, no cattle."
Yeah.
Is one of my favorite quotes out of that particular book.
No, absolutely. So
Also, Brandon, when you're talking about that mind shift, and
yes,
and also related to what Anton was saying about generational wealth not being sexy, right? And it's because we live in this microwave society where we want everything right now.
right.
I want to be able to go invest $10 in Bitcoin and be a millionaire next week, right? Like that's what there's even an expectation of that in a lot of people. But instead of thinking of like generational wealth as to like money you don't get to use, like what if we thought about it like nobody in my family will ever be poor? Like I can make it so nobody in every generation after me will ever have to apply for Medicaid or food stamps. Like those are things you could do for your kids and your grandkids and your great grandkids, where like generations that probably have no idea who you are would be able to benefit from what you do. And that could be like the start of the mind shift that we need to start thinking that way.
Yeah. I agree. Can I chime in on that too? I think that when you talk about generational wealth, though, like I don't know that it's a buzzword, right? And so I'm not a big. I tend not to love buzzwords because I think that when we talk about generational wealth, I don't know that people really understand the sacrifice that it will take to actually start generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
That means that maybe the things that I want my grandkids to have, I will never see. So it's a huge amount of sacrifice. And if we want to be honest, we have to trust and think that that what we instill into our offspring, what we instill into our children, that they're going to be good stewards of the sacrifices that we make, because that's not a guarantee, and it's not a given that just because we do all these things, save all this money, obtain all these assets by way of real estate, whatever the case may be, it doesn't mean that the offspring are going to do right by those assets.
Right.
So we need to instill into our children and to our offspring the understanding of solid financial literacy and planning, so that they can do well by you and do well by their offspring.
No, and I'm telling you, Andre, you hit it right on the head, because you and Chris have a fantastic point. In fact, the Bible says that, King Solomon says, look, you don't know if all your wealth is going to go to someone wise or a fool. And that's exactly what he said. And he was the richest man in the world, right? And it's like, unless you pass down the principles and the precepts on how to perpetuate, right, that that wealth, it could end up going to a fool, and it could all go away. And I was just looking up I just did some quick research on like the definition of generation, right? The definition is the difference in age between parents and like their kids. So let's say people have children in their late 20s or early 30s, right? Just use that as a working definition, right? Let's say between the ages of like 28 and 35. Well, that's a generation, right? That difference, that's between 28 and 35 years, because that's the difference. That's a generation, right? And so, like, okay, can you create, maintain, and grow wealth over 28 to 35 years, which then goes to the next, and they have to do the same, and then they have to do the same, and so on and so forth. And that can prove to be challenging.
I think you can think about the opposite, though.
What do you mean?
Well, think about, like, instead of like what Andre was saying, instead of trying to teach it to be like attractive to people and kids and things like that, maybe you should attach it or attack it from the stance of having courage, like a courage not to have the courage not to be impulsive with your money,
right?
And so maybe that's a different way of sharing with your kids, instead of just buying what they want or showing them like, hey, there's things that I want to do too. I have this car, but I really wanted this car. Here's why I didn't make that purchase, and break it down to them. And so maybe, yes, you still want to leave them money or assets or property or stocks or whatever it is that you want to leave them, but you have to teach them, because I think that's where we're sort of failing as a society. Mm-hmm. We don't have enough courageous, and I can't really speak for a woman because I'm not a woman, but we don't have a lot of courageous men. Because it takes real courage, dedication, all those things that Andre just described, all of those fall up under the umbrella of being courageous.
Yeah, and I think there has to be teaching. Yeah, like we have to teach.
But courage is something you have to teach, though. I mean, courage is something that you don't really. I don't know if that's a genetic trait. What I mean? Courage. I think it's something that you could inherently, because it's. I mean, we're infused with like a fight or flight response.
Sure.
I mean, some people, when they see a loose dog and you walking down the street, most people are going to take off running and jump on top of a car.
Well, it depends on the size of the dog.
Right. But some people, it doesn't matter. Like, you've seen videos where you've laughed on Facebook where it's like a little tiny dog and people are running like it's a Rottweiler or something like that. You're like, what's going on? Some people, it's just like, dog, I'm running. You know what I mean? But some people, like firemen, for example, right? Mm-hmm. They see a burning building and something like that, or you see like a passerby. Like, I just saw a video the other day where a house was on fire and kids ran into a burning building, like a group of kids, and got pets out. You know what I mean? So at some point, you can have courage, but like that's like a moment of courage. I think like a lifelong habits of courage is something that has to be taught to do the right thing in the face of being impulsive all the time. Because a lot of times, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, one of the things you and I talk about a lot, though, Anton, is I'm going to go ahead and say unfortunate difference in terms of the generation now versus generations before, because the generations now don't necessarily need to have so much courage because so much is given to them. They don't necessarily have to work and sacrifice and have more effort. I'm not going to say that for everybody, because you have people in middle America, right, who have to get up and work hard, but I'm just saying, by and large, if you look at generations preceding, there were completely different expectations put upon them. And so, that courage had to be thrust upon them. They had to be able to bring that from within, right? Whether they're fighting for civil rights, or whether, they're fighting to get up and eat every day, whether they're helping out their parents because they have multiple siblings and their parents are already working a couple of jobs, plus they have to go to school, right? For a lot of kids today in suburbia, that's a tough challenge right there. Now, again, there's a lot of kids that are in urban America, right? I grew up in Baltimore. I know about urban America, and you have to have that courage. I mean, it's a requisite, for sure. So I think it's just, I think it really just depends upon where you're from and what the life circumstances that you're faced with. So I would definitely agree with you,
But
as far as that's concerned.
but look at it like this. So like Chris and Andre talked about, growing up and being less fortunate, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the education has to come in. Let's just say you don't do anything bad. You grew up in Baltimore. You don't do anything bad. You decide to get your education, right? And then you're starting off well. You're 23 years old. You're doing right things, right? But still, if you're impulsive, you'll say, wait, well, I didn't have this. I didn't have this. I didn't have this. I'm going to go, I need every new Jordan as soon as they come out. I need the new iPhone every single year. Even though the one that I have is perfectly fine, I got to redo it. Like those decisions right there, because you're not really thinking about the future. Now, I don't think that you can go all in, right? Because then that might not make you happy. And I think there has to be a little bit of happiness in there. You have to enjoy your life a little bit. I think
Agreed.
What happens is sometimes we go 100% on happy. What's going to make me happy 100% of the time?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the cars, like a Honda Accord would do good. But you know what? I need that C class. I need that E class.
Right.
I might struggle to pay for it, but you know what? It feels good to drive.
Right. Absolutely.
And so
I wanted to say something about the education that we're talking about. So, I definitely agree with you guys when you're saying like what happens with what you give, there's no guarantees for it. But with proper financial planning, like I'm sure Andre is very familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
you can have a level of control over what happens to it, right? So like, let's say, and I know, a lot of people have heard about these families that have trust funds where the children are just receiving money and they don't ever have to do anything, right? And like a lot of people talk bad about those kinds of people that have this, generational wealth. But instead of like, talking bad about them, why don't you just try to be like them, right? Why don't we create funds like that for our children where we can educate them from a young age and tell them, well, look, our family has this and you could have access to it, but there's some things you have to do too, like graduate college or have a trade. Like you could put limits on who's going to receive money from that trust. Like if somebody's strung out on drugs, we're not going to feed that habit. We're not going to allow that person to destroy what the family's built. And, personally, for my family plan, because my projections go out 100 years, I've put a lot of thought into what's going to happen over that time and what's going to still exist at that time. But personally, I want to try to eliminate poverty without necessarily making anybody rich. So, I would put a limit to the median household income for how much each person would get. And currently in America, that's about $60,000 a year. So it wouldn't eliminate the need for working, but it would eliminate the possibility that that particular child would ever be in need of social services.
Got it. Nope, that's a great point. And so we got a few more things to discuss, but what we're going to do is actually make a part 2 of this because this has been a fantastic, discussion. I want to end off with one question to you guys, and this will be a question for the three of you because you kind of hit on it a little bit. So if you have $10,000 to invest right now, $10,000. Out of the three, where do you feel that your money would be most served? Would it be most served in putting that money into stocks, some type of a different mutual fund, an NFT, or into cryptocurrency? Okay, you got 10 G's right now.
Those are my
Okay.
only options.
Those are your options. We could talk about other options at another time. Stocks, mutual funds, NFTs, okay, and what did I say? Crypto. So we could just kind of shoot. What are your thoughts?
Personally, I'm going for
Absolutely.
the stocks.
Going for the stocks. Okay.
I'm going for the stocks because I feel the others are kind of like fads and they don't have the same intrinsic value that the companies that are generating income have. It's something I've talked about in my videos as well. But I'm also not a big fan of stocks. But if those are my only options, I'm going with the stock.
Well, I was going to add a little X factor in there for your boy Andre. I was going to throw an index universal life policy or something like that. A little, I was going to throw something on the side in there, but we're going to talk about that our next time for sure, because I want to go in that in depth and kind of debunk some myths. But go ahead, Andre.
So I would say I'm going to be bullish on a mutual fund or some type of index fund or EFT.
Okay.
And the reason being is because I can get ownership in those same companies that Chris is referring to, but in a way that's more diversified, where I'm not gonna, with that $10,000, if that's the only $10,000 I have, I'd rather have it in 15 different companies as opposed to one company that could have a bad situation happen and that company could no longer be around. And so long term, when I'm thinking long term, I would much rather have it in some type of fund that has some diversity in it.
Okay, fair enough. And what about you? What about you, Anton?
I would say I like stocks. I like mutual funds as well. So I would probably put probably 85% of that 10 grand into those. I'm still learning about NFTs. I've studied a lot. I know it's, I'm not like Chris shaking my stick at the modern thing, because we haven't made it to a point where we fleshed it out yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and again, it's talking about, like, I don't want to, sometimes it's hard to swallow a thing when you don't feel like there's no emotional connection to it. Right. And I think it's very cool to sometimes to be on the ground floor of it. Like how many people, complain about not investing in Tesla when he first started. Now, like all the smart people say, man, I wish I did that. Right. And so even if I put like $500 into an NFT that, I don't know, Jay-Z creates and I sit on it, who knows what that could be worth it. But it's only $5,000. I already have the much more secure things. But what if I'm just really emotionally interested? But I'm not going to throw the whole 10,000 there, but a little bit just to see how it works out. And if I lose it, I got to be comfortable with doing that. But it's okay. It's $500, right? Everything else is still okay. If I still got 8,500 working for me and I lose $500, I got to be okay with that,
right?
Because everything is a risk.
No, I appreciate that. And just for those out there who don't know what an NFT is, I'm going to go ahead and read the definition for you. NFT is a non-fungible token, okay, which basically means it's a one of a kind digital asset that belongs to you and you only, okay? So just kind of, it could be artwork, music, something like that. So that's what that is. And so me personally, I'm a little bit more conservative. I'm definitely I own several stocks, but I'm a mutual fund guy. So I'm gonna put my money in a mutual fund, but I also own several stocks as well. But go ahead, Andre, as we begin to finish.
So just real quick, I think that also too, something that could itch the scratch, if that makes sense, or scratch the itch, excuse me. You could also invest in those companies that are also creating the NFTs. And get into some type of tech stock that or tech mutual fund or tech index fund that actually are also doing that too. That way, if it all blows up, you still have something there in the form of an entity to fall back on. So
I appreciate that. That's a fantastic point. So look, guys, we've had some fantastic discussion today. I really appreciate the three of you being on the Visionary Experience podcast. Listen, if you guys want to learn more about Andre, Chris, and Anton, check out our show notes. You know, we love to have any kind of feedback from you for sure. We are going to do a part 2 of this because we have some other discussion topics that I definitely want us to dig into. Thank you so much, guys, for all of your insight, all of your energy, and everything that you gave to this podcast today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes,
No problem.
I appreciate
See you in the
it.
next one, bro.
Great.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Visionary Experience. One love. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. God bless.